Butter, you're the reason why I am my weight. You're the reason why I rip my shirts, why I eat at the buffet. Butter, you got your very own kind of nice. We all live inside a butter world. Oh, butter, butter, gonna eat it by the sticks tonight. Gonna eat out this world. Oh, butter, I'm about to take a bite, 'cause I want that salty cream. What I dream about all night. Butter dreaming. I'm about to take a bite, 'cause I want that salty cream. What I dream about all.
Yo, 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 yo.
Welcome everyone to a study club episode with Butterfuel. We have our wonderful host here, Mr. Anderson. That way, he's there, and I am Jay, holding down the home fort here in Massachusetts, while Mr. Anderson visits the warm tropical climates of El Salvador.
Yeah, how's it going, Jay? Another warm evening over here.
Oh, that's
Can't get
awesome.
enough.
That is awesome, man. Very jealous. Very jealous. This morning, that lady at the gym, that the one with the blonde hair, she asked me, "Oh, where's your other half?" And I was like, "Oh, my brother. He's visiting mom, doing some family work over there. So he has abandoned me. So people here miss you, man."
Yeah, sure. They walk around the gym more comfortably now that I'm not intimidating everyone.
Oh yeah, people.
You-
Yeah, people feel regular size now.
Yeah,
They don't feel small.
when I walk on the hallways, like they can only fit one.
Yes. Only one big muscle guy
Yeah,
in
can't
our
wait to
gym.
go back to a real gym, man. The gym here is severely limited. We do what we can.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But anyways, we have a great show planned today. We'll be talking about one of our favorite topics, protein. Man, I can't decide what I like to talk about more, protein or fat. We've talked a lot about fat on this show. So if you haven't checked out our previous study clubs, go check those out. We're covering everything about, saturated fats, PUFAs, and seed oils. But man, protein, such a big topic, protein and fat. I could talk about those forever. Cholesterol, another great topic. But today we'll focus on protein. Protein and
Protein.
gains. Yeah, who doesn't love gains? But before we get started, make sure you like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell on YouTube and follow us on our other social medias. We're on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, and of course, YouTube. Go over there on Instagram and support our page, like and share our content. The Algalords hate us, but support us on the mission. Go join our free Discord group. We hold monthly challenges and weekly Zoom meetings on Wednesdays. We can just talk about the monthly challenge. We can talk about nutrition, health, fitness, and beyond. No topics are off limits. We've raw milked some people, and we have a raw meter that joins. He's trying it out. So, it's just a great space to learn. And, buy our merch. Check it out. I'm wearing the Make Butter Great Again hat. We have t-shirts and hats. Go get the Butter Battery t-shirts, the hoodies and everything. So,
Yes,
don't
sir.
forget, yeah, support us in the mission, dismantling the perverse food agenda while advocating for animal-based foods as the antidote to tyranny.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Very pumped about tonight's episode. Let's get to it.
Yeah.
All right. So, title of the paper that we're reviewing today is called Food First Approach to Enhance the Regulation of Post-Exercise Skeletal Muscle Protein Synthesis and Remodeling. Right? So the title is a big giveaway about the topic that we're going to cover, which is great. All
Yeah,
right, so
yeah. And just to mention, this is a review article.
yes, review article, correct? Yes.
Yeah.
All right, so the abstract. Protein recommendations are provided on a daily basis as defined by the recommended dietary allowance, RDA, at zero 0.8 grams of protein per kilogram per day. However, meal-based as opposed to daily dietary protein recommendations are likely more informative given the role of daily protein distribution pattern in modulating the post-exercise muscle protein synthetic response. Current protein meal recommendations to plateau post-exercise muscle protein synthesis rates are based on the ingestion of isolated protein sources and not protein-rich whole foods. It is generally more common to eat whole food sources of dietary protein within a normal eating pattern to meet dietary protein requirements. Yet, there is a need to define how dietary protein action on muscle protein synthesis rates can be modulated by other nutrients within a food matrix to achieve protein requirements for optimal muscle adaptations. Recent developments suggest that the identification of an optimal protein source should likely consider the characteristics of the protein and the food matrix in which it is consumed. This review aims to discuss recent concepts related to protein quality, the potential interactive effects of the food matrix to achieve optimal protein requirements, and elicit a robust prandial muscle protein synthetic response with an emphasis on post-exercise recovery window.
Yeah. So there you have it, man.
There you have it.
Yeah.
There you
Yeah.
have it.
Just to touch on some of the key points of the paper, whole protein foods are often more than their constituent amino acids containing other non-protein nutritive components to facilitate nutrient-nutrient interactions, modulate nutrient behavior, and or act directly as anabolic signaling molecules. A food-first approach to post-exercise protein intake will be beneficial for both the skeletal muscle adaptive response and diet quality for most people. All right, so basically what we're looking at just right from the start is comparing isolated protein versus whole food protein, and basically looking at its response in the human body in whether that's in the muscle protein synthesis response, or as we dive into the paper, we'll look at the amino acid availability in the bloodstream, right? But then, so some of the topics we'll be covering is, obviously protein, muscle synthesis, protein quality, and the food matrix, right? What is the food matrix? What does that mean? So a lot of information. Get ready. It's going to get very technical, but that's what we're here for. Hopefully, we can help you understand.
Yeah.
I thought I changed the colors, but
Yeah. So it does.
guess it hasn't updated.
Yeah. I don't know how you refresh this. I mean, I've been trying, but it is what it is.
It
It's
is
what
what
we
it
got.
is. Yes.
All right. Do you want to do
push
the
forward.
introduction?
Yeah. So lots of information on the intro. Let's see. Lots of context to mention, right? So, introduction. The ingestion of protein immediately after exercise and throughout a prolonged recovery period is essential to stimulate muscle protein synthesis rates to facilitate remodeling and repair. Muscle protein remodeling, or the dynamic process of synthesis and breakdown, is required to remove and replace damaged proteins with new muscle proteins. It is these exercise-induced increases in protein remodeling that provide the basis for training adaptations that lead to improved physical performance. In other words, gains, right? While both protein synthesis and breakdown are relevant for muscle mass remodeling, exercise and feeding-induced protein synthesis provide the greatest contribution to the net anabolic response at the muscle level in healthy adults.
I really
This
like
notion,
that.
yeah.
Exercise I really like that. Exercise and feeding induced protein synthesis is what really triggers, the anabolic response at the muscle level, right? Because social media, there's a tendency to like, do all of this, biohack, lights and something whatnot, but exercise and food.
Yeah. It's really simple. It's not easy, but it's simple.
Correct.
Yeah, it's just stack as many wins as possible, day after day. So moving on, this notion may become more blurred at the whole body level. My bad. As such, there has been much interest in the whole role of protein nutrition in maximizing acute changes in post-exercise muscle protein synthesis rates and its implication on the long-term muscle adaptive response to exercise training. It is important to note that these exercise-induced increases in muscle protein synthesis rates can facilitate muscle adaptations that are either hypertrophic or non-hypertrophic in nature. All right.
Beautiful.
Yeah. So when we're mentioning hypertrophic, we mean, Jay, correct me if I'm wrong, but hypertrophy, we're referring to the growth in the size, right, of the muscle tissues.
Correct. Yes.
And when they say non-hypertrophic in nature, I guess they mean not necessarily size, but maybe strength.
No, that is true. That is true. Non-hypertrophic, I guess it just means everything that doesn't involve size. So it could be either density, so more muscle cells, or yeah, I don't.
Or perhaps like better recruitment of the muscle fibers.
Oh yes, yes, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Right.
That's the strength aspect that you're talking about. Yeah.
Right. So an area within performance nutrition that has received considerable attention is defining the optimal level of protein intake in a meal to maximally stimulate the post-exercise muscle protein synthetic response. It has been shown that the ingested protein dose response curves of post-exercise muscle protein synthesis rates reach their breaking points or plateau at 0.25 grams of protein per kilogram per meal in healthy young men. So this is always a big one, right? Like, how much protein should you be consuming? It's well known or well shared amongst the evidence-based community that 30 grams of protein seems to maximize that anabolic signal, right?
Yeah.
This paper will discuss some of that. I believe it's called the leucine hypothesis.
Yeah. And just for context, so what, you weigh 100 kilograms, that means you can, on a per meal basis, it seems to plateau around 25 grams of protein, you would say, which is interesting, but obviously there's more context to it.
Yeah, and the paper dives into that, so we'll mention it and make sure to make a point when we come across it. In some cases, ingestion of a larger protein amounts were required to induce a plateau on the dose-response curve of muscle protein synthesis rates in young adults. This result was believed to relate to the amount of exercised muscle mass, for example, full body versus lower body resistance exercise regimes. All right, so there you have, there's one variable that might affect the dose response, right? Whether you did a full body workout or just a lower body workout. So there's that to consider, right?
Yeah.
Thus, exercise mode, intensity, and duration may differentially impact post-exercise protein meal requirements to optimize the stimulation of muscle protein synthesis rates. Wow, that phrase gets repeated a lot. Muscle protein synthesis rates.
MPS.
MPS, that's right. It is evident that protein requirements are elevated above the protein recommended dietary allowance set at 0.8 grams protein per kilogram per day, when the goal is to optimize MPS, right? However, the RDA values are established to prevent deficiencies, and specifically the protein RDA of 0.8 grams of protein per kilogram per day only represent the minimal daily amount of protein required to consume to prevent net nitrogen loss, right?
Yeah, so basically if you want to maintain whatever whatever muscle you have, you can go as low as 0.8 grams per kilogram per day.
That's what they seem to suggest.
That's what they seem to suggest, right? But obviously this would be someone that's out of shape, probably doesn't carry a lot of muscle, and is already an inactive individual.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of caveats to that.
Right. Currently, there are limited data available with regards to the impact of whole food ingestion to contribute protein meal requirements to stimulate post-exercise muscle protein synthesis rates when compared to isolated protein sources. Right. So it seems like a lot of the research that is available today has more to do with looking at isolated protein sources versus whole food sources.
Yeah.
So there's that to consider, when we're discussing the optimal protein amounts, when we're discussing how many grams per pound you should be having. Seems like the paper is suggesting that a lot of that research is done with isolated protein sources. So, take that with a grain of salt. Besides supplying dietary amino acids, protein-dense whole foods often provide other important non-protein components. For example, lipids, carbohydrates, micronutrients, and other bioactive constituents within their food matrix that may interact and subsequently contribute to the regulation of muscle protein synthesis rates. Okay. In this review, they discuss the current understanding and recent advancements of protein quality and potential contributions of the food matrix to the anabolic milieu and synergistic stimulation of muscle protein synthesis rates. Right. So we'll be looking at protein quality and the food matrix, and then putting it all together with exercise.
Yes.
So those are the three main pillars that this paper focuses on. So that was quite a mouthful, but basically you're understanding the RDAs suggest 0.8 grams per kilogram per day, which is very, very low. You'll often hear people say for the optimal amount for muscle building is 1.6 grams per kilogram to 2.2, and there doesn't seem to be any downside to going way beyond this, of course.
Yeah. Protein quality. All right, so it is recommended to meet dietary protein intakes by ingesting highly digestible, high-quality proteins. There are variations to the methods for protein quality evaluation. This is when we start talking about the PDCAAs and the DIA score. The protein digestibility corrected amino acid score, PDCAAS, and the digestible indispensable amino acid score, DIAS, to reference proteins according to their ability to deliver target intakes of indispensable amino acids. So these are the two scoring methods that we currently have in order to tell you how digestible and how effective these protein sources are for your body to ingest amino acids. For the past 2 decades, PDCAAs have been used to estimate protein quality. However, the Food and Agriculture Organization, the FAO, currently recommends the DIAS procedure. So the DIAS procedure takes into account that digestibility of amino acids should be directly determined at the end of the small intestine through ileal digestibility, and is commonly performed in growing pigs. DIAS is an improvement upon these PDCAAs that estimate protein quality based on the total tract fecal digestibility with the use of rats as its model. Basically, both kind of evaluate the small intestine and how much of the amino acid has been absorbed in the small intestine. It seems like the DIAS just sees it more towards the end of the small intestine, while the PDCAs apparently takes an estimate at a different point, which makes sense.
Yeah, total tract fecal digestibility with the use of rats.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So you're looking at the total tract in rats. And then the other one, they're looking at pigs and just small intestine.
Yeah. DIAS should allow for an improved ranking system to avoid underestimating the anabolic potential of higher quality proteins. And yeah, I mean, it makes sense, right? If you measure how much of the amino acid has been consumed towards the end of the small intestine, then basically tells you how effective your body absorbed this. Obviously, you want as much of it absorbed. Much of the research into DIAS is limited to isolated protein sources and or raw feedstuff for livestock production, right? So your protein powders. This is noteworthy as cooking of protein foods can modify digestive kinetics and metabolism of dietary proteins. So merely the act of cooking can improve or modify the digestion of proteins. In addition, DIAS does not attempt to consider how these scores translate into optimizing more downstream physiological targets of interest to a physically active person or athlete. Um, yeah, basically saying like if you're an active person, and this will be covered further ahead, that if you're an active person, you're more likely to absorb the amino acid versus an unactive person. Basically, the body takes what it needs. And if you're more physically active, it's going to take more. But the diet doesn't take that into account. The primary metabolic action of dietary protein-derived amino acids is to stimulate the whole body and muscle protein synthesis to support a positive net protein balance. Yes, so yeah, being in positive net protein balance means you're not losing muscle. At least potentially you're building or repairing. You have good amount of protein in your system. Moreover, it has been demonstrated that exercise may directly impact protein digestibility and the subsequent release of dietary protein-derived amino acids into the circulation. Thus, it is likely important to consider the consequences of prior exercise on protein digestibility quality, especially for more physically active populations such as athletes involved in regular training or competition. Excellent.
Yeah. So just repeating what you said before. Your protein requirements, how much protein you demand will change on your level of activity, right? So if you don't use it, you'll lose it.
Yeah, a very very simple. What do you call that? Heuristic. If you don't use it, you lose it.
They were talking about muscle.
Yeah, we're talking about muscle, guys. Get your heads out of the gutter. So yeah, look at this table. This table kind of lies out the diets and the PDCAAs, and tells you that the higher the score, the more digestible, more usable for the human body, or a living being, and it's grouped by animal-derived foods and non-animal-derived foods, and these are just two completely different categories. The animal foods versus the plant foods, basically. Soy. Yeah.
Soy.
Soy, wheat. Right. I mean, soy is like the best thing that they have, right? 0.8. The worst thing that we have is fish, and that's a 1. So that's already
a 1.
That's already greater than the best soy out there. And you know how people like say, "Oh, let me have my oats. I need my oatmeal," or even cooking the oatmeal, right? It like lowers the protein quality. Well, no, there's actually a protein concentrate versus the cooked rolled oats.
Yeah. So if you refine the plant products into just the proteins, then you get a marginal bump in its quality. That seems like a lot of effort for a very small benefit.
Yeah. Look at this. Rice is different, right? Rice is flipped. Real rice is better than the rice protein concentrate. So if you're like looking for supplements, right, which obviously I don't know why, and it says rice protein, you're getting actually pretty worse protein quality.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at the cooked kidney beans. Beans, one of the biggest favorites when it comes to plant-based protein. 0.59 on the score. It's not really great.
Yeah. I mean, like you only can eat so much per day, right? And you have the choices of take beef 1.12. Why would you ever want to eat anything in this table? You're just objectively consuming poor protein.
Yeah, you're choosing to live life in a harder difficulty when you don't have to. Like there's no prize for choosing the harder way, other than leaving gains on the table.
Yeah. Yeah, and it, like social media, the Instagram people kind of just show you, oh, for breakfast, oatmeal, and then all these foods, and they tell you, oh, I consume X amount of protein. Turns out those grams of protein that you just consume are inferior to whatever meat you also had in there. Hopefully, you had some chicken there, right? Hopefully, you had some beef or pork, right? Beef and pork are pretty much same spot right there. Milk is
Yeah,
incredible. Goat
milk is
milk.
the most anabolic, I guess.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting though. I wonder what it means to have a rating above 1. Like, does that mean because out of all the protein that's available in the food, does that mean that the protein gets multiplied? Like, I mean, I guess we'd have to, that's just a question I came up with. I mean, I'm not really sure what that means. Um,
Yeah, no, yeah,
you know, it,
there is a formula for it, and it's like you're dividing nitrogen over something, and but yeah, it is like a whole separate subject to try to understand the formula.
yeah, that could be an interesting topic to cover in the future. Not today, but
Yeah,
just to highlight, animal protein is the standard of protein, period. Anything else is just close to imitation. And in my view, in our view, it shouldn't even be entertained as protein because, you're limiting yourself and you're
yeah,
making your body work extra. And, you're also ingesting, the anti-nutrients and the natural plant pesticides that come in the food. And, that might not be the end of the world. Humans are incredibly resilient. But clearly, whatever benefit you think you're getting from the plant foods, um, if you thought protein was one of them, then relative to what, right? Relative to its animal-based counterpart, not really. You know,
yeah, yeah.
not really.
So yeah, I mean, just using the a very important takeaway is that just using the protein on the nutrition facts table on these food sources, non-animal derived food sources, it's basically misleading. It's yeah, you're not actually getting that amount of protein. So if your diet has any of these foods, you're diluting your protein grams that you consume per that day. All right, moving on. Uh, Label food proteins to assess the amount of speed of release of dietary protein-derived amino acids in circulation. Um, I think I picked that halfway. Yeah, this method combines primed constant infusion methods which specifically produce labeled food proteins to assess the amount and speed of release of dietary protein-derived amino acids in circulation. Yeah, yeah. For example, it has been shown that there are differences in postprandial flankic handling of leucine versus phenylalanine, which impacts the appearance rates and concentrations in the blood. In general, there is greater selective splanchnic uptake of phenylalanine when compared to leucine. Overall, plasma dietary amino acid availability measurements can be coupled with measurements of MPS to provide additional insight into the anabolic potential of the ingested food.
Yeah, and splanchnic only means like it's like a term used for like organs found in our like in our
Intestines?
internal, yeah, in our intestines, right? So I think it refers to like the stomach and the intestines, like the gut. um I guess it's just a bigger term, a funny one, but nothing too complicated. All they're saying is the handling by which our machinery that digests the food.
Yeah, yeah. Moreover, the majority of studies that have assessed the impact of protein nutrition on the stimulation of postprandial muscle protein synthesis rates have focused on isolated protein sources. Yeah, just hitting on that theme that a lot of the protein studies out there are just isolated protein sources. So your whey protein powders, casein protein powders. Based on these studies of isolated protein sources, such as isolated whey, micellar casein, soy, the leucine trigger hypothesis was developed. Leucine being an amino acid. This leucine trigger hypothesis suggests that a rapid rise within 60 to 90 in blood leucine concentrations in close temporal proximity to an exercise bout after protein ingestion is most anabolic for stimulating post-exercise muscle protein synthesis rates, as observed with the ingestion of leucine-rich isolated protein sources. So basically saying that a lot of high MPS rate is observed when you consume an isolated leucine-rich protein source post-workout. However, it would seem likely there is not an absolute blood leucine concentration that serves a maximum switch on for the post-exercise muscle protein MPS response.
Yeah. So two things they're measuring, right? They're measuring the amino acids in the blood, but then they're also looking at the MPS response, right? So these two things, and what they're saying here is, it is not necessarily observed that the highest availability of amino acids in the blood leads to the highest MPS response.
Yeah,
which is crazy.
Yeah, that is pretty crazy. That's when you start focusing too much on specific compounds and kind of stop seeing the full picture. Interestingly, however, the ingestion of whole foods is also potent for the stimulation of post-exercise muscle MPS, despite not facilitating a rapid rise in leucinemia during immediate post-exercise period. So yeah, here saying whole food sources also trigger MPS at great rates, despite not having this rapid rise in leucinemia. What they were just mentioning up above, high blood concentration of leucine. Specifically, the ingestion of protein-dense whole foods results in prolonged release of dietary amino acids into circulation, with plasma amino acid concentration peaking at 120 minutes of postprandial period in healthy adults. So if you eat whole foods, you have a prolonged release of amino acids into your bloodstream, and you reach a peak, right? So on a curve, after 2 hours, you are reaching maximum amino acid concentration, and then obviously you have more time thereafter with high amino acid levels. Thus, the leucine trigger hypothesis may be more relevant after the ingestion of isolated protein sources as opposed to whole food protein sources. Specifically, other non-protein components within the whole food matrix may likely influence the regulation of post-exercise muscle protein synthesis rates. Nice. Oh yeah, so this table, MPS response.
Yeah, so they're looking at which foods give the highest MPS response. A few notable mentions: whey, skim milk, whole egg, and then whey and milk protein concentrate, beef, as far as MPS response goes.
Yeah. And it's like in two different groups: intrinsically labeled food studies and non-labeled food studies, which is interesting. But yeah, they tell you how many, what is the amino acid mostly available in that food source, and whole egg has 68% leucine, and that's why you kind of aligns with the leucine hypothesis a little bit, but it is a whole food, showing one of the highest MPS response, which this way over here kind of differs from this way MPS response over here. So it's never a clear picture. There's obviously a lot of variables here at play. But yeah, I mean, beef, pork, high MPS, higher than soy, right? So again, I mean, let's highlight again that if you're choosing protein sources that are not from animals, you are objectively consuming lower quality protein amino acids, and thus by also producing lower MPS. So in what world would you ever choose this? Oh, my fibers, man, my fibers. Anyway,
Yeah, it's pretty clear.
yeah, yeah. You want to take on the food matrix?
Yeah, yeah. You know, so this is where Morpheus and Neo come together and they whip up a nice omelet. It's the best part of the movie. Yeah. But when we're talking about the food matrix, the in general, the nutritional quality of food is primarily based on the relative quantities of each individual nutritional components: proteins, carbohydrates, lipids, and micronutrients. Um, this notion that's certainly been true when assessing the role of dietary protein in post-exercise muscle remodeling processes in humans, as most studies have used isolated protein fractions. It has been shown that amino acids, particularly the essential amino acids, have potent anabolic properties towards the stimulation of MPS rates in vivo in humans. However, the holistic properties of foods and their potential influence on post-exercise muscle protein remodeling and repair has not been extensively studied. The food matrix refers to the overall chemical dynamics of food, which includes how various food components are structured and interact. Yeah, so basically just a lot of words saying that, amino acids obviously have a response, but there's more to that than just the protein. There's more to that than just the amino acids, right? When we start looking at the overall food matrix, uh, there seems to be some interactions going on with non-protein nutrients, right? So the paper goes on to say, emerging evidence seems to suggest that there are potential interactions occurring within the food matrix. In other words, food synergy that modulate various metabolic processes, including MPS, right? So now the paper goes on to mention some studies that they don't seem to be highlighted on your end, but they're highlighted on my end, so that's cool. Uh, so Elliott et al. Demonstrated that whole milk ingestion consumed 1 hour after resistance exercise stimulated greater amino acid uptake across the leg when compared to fat-free milk or isocaloric amounts of fat-free milk in healthy men and women. Okay, so what the calories are listed there, but one of the most common talking points against these studies is, oh, well, they compared whole milk against skim milk against fat-free milk. So obviously whole milk was more anabolic because it has more calories, right? Naturally, right? So obviously calories and the energy you ingest plays a role. Calories matter, people. But they took that into consideration as well when they also measured isocaloric amounts of fat-free milk. Okay,
Wow.
so um, they're even with the fat-free milk, isocaloric amount of fat-free milk, they're even ingesting more total protein. But
Yeah.
that study seems to show that the greater amino acid uptake was related to the whole milk ingestion versus fat-free milk or the isocaloric fat-free milk. Okay, so does that make sense?
That
So
that is powerful, man.
yeah, that is very powerful because you're looking at an isocaloric amount with an even higher amount of protein in the fat-free milk did not show as many amino acids available in the body as did the whole fat milk, which is
Yeah.
which is pretty interesting because I mean there's more protein in the fat-free milk.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, you're basically, because the fat-free milk has not fat, it's gonna, in order to calorie equate it, you have to consume more. So you are basically consuming almost double, 14.5 grams versus 8 grams of protein. Even so, you saw greater amino acid uptake with the whole milk, right? So those
Yeah,
8 grams of protein did were more efficient than 15 grams of protein. Incredible.
Incredible. Yeah. And, without diving into the paper specifics, we'll take that at face value. I mean, that's pretty impressive. But moving on, it says, likewise, Van Loon's research group demonstrated that differential temporal stimulation of post-exercise muscle protein synthesis rates after ingestion of skim milk versus isonitrogenous amounts of beef in young men. So specifically, this work demonstrated that skim milk ingestion elicited a greater stimulation of post-exercise MPS rates during the early recovery phase, 0 to 2 hours, when compared to beef ingestion.
Oh, that is interesting.
Yeah, the greater anabolic potential in muscles during the early recovery period after skim milk ingestion occurred despite beef ingestion, inducing a more rapid protein digestion and amino acid absorption rates, which ultimately facilitated more dietary amino acids being available in the circulation in the beef condition. Wow. Wait, yeah. So is that saying what? So that's saying the skim milk showed a better MPS signal, but the beef showed higher amino acid availability.
Yeah, I think that's differential temporal stimulation of post-exercise MPS after ingestion of skim milk versus same protein quantity of beef. So gram for gram, they're consuming the same amount of protein. Greater stimulation of post-exercise MPS during the early period. Occurred despite beef, inducing more rapid protein digestion and amino acid absorption rates, which ultimately facilitated more dietary amino acids being available in the circulation of beef condition. Interesting. Yeah. So higher MPS from milk, but the beef condition increased the dietary amino acids in circulation.
So milk is more anabolic than beef? Huh. Well, we'll keep on looking. So these data are interesting as they highlight that commonly assumed anabolic characteristics of an ingested protein source, such as the higher peak amplitude of leucinemia with beef ingestion, do not universally translate into a greater early muscle protein synthetic response when compared to whole food milk ingestion in healthy young men.
Interesting. So yeah, basically saying milk versus beef, milk shows a greater MPS in the early period.
Yeah, in the early period. Yeah, so if you look at the chart, if you look at the graph above, I think that's a good visual for what they're trying to actually say. So, if you look at the highest peak, you're looking at the isolated protein powders, but then that's talking about protein powders, not necessarily the milk. But for example, you see higher MPS initially, but not in the longer run, right? So the whole food curves are more they're wider, they're more spread out.
Yeah.
The peaks are less sharp, but that doesn't have to do with the with the skim milk, anyways.
Yeah, no, but this chart is great. I really like it because you see isolated protein powders just being high peak, which is what I believe like the study is trying to show you. Oh yeah, you get a high peak of MPS in the beginning, but that's about it. Tapers down really quick, really fast. However, you have your food, your whole food, and there is a whole food matrix effect that kind of boosts your amino acid concentration in the blood and your MPS concentration in the blood, MPS rate, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, pretty cool. Pretty cool. So moving on. So we're at minute 44, right? So we have to keep it moving.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, we have a lot to cover. So the paper then goes on to compare what happens when you put different isolated compounds together and compare that to a whole food. So look, interestingly, studies have demonstrated that co-ingestion of micellar casein with individual food components such as milk fat, carbohydrates, or milk serum does not further augment the postprandial MPS response when compared to ingestion of micellar casein alone. It's worth noting, however, these studies were conducted at rest. Perhaps an exercise stimulus may be required to create more relevant interaction. Nonetheless, it would seem that superior post-exercise MPS responses observed with whole milk or skim milk were not related to these specific food components. Instead, it is possible that the specific effect of the dairy matrix on the regulation of post-exercise MPS rates cannot be attributed to an individual nutrient and is dependent on the sum and interaction of all its nutrients. Okay, so again, in other words, they're saying is, they showed that with the ingestion of the isolated protein, but then they added some milk fat, they added some carbohydrates, sort of like to mimic a real whole food. That did not show a big response on like the whole food. Okay, suggesting that it's got to do more with the sum and interaction of the whole food's nutrients, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's likely possible to manipulate the matrix of foods either with food fortification techniques or directly by altering feeding approaches within cows to impact human health. So they mentioned food fortification. Of course, we're not about that. Most milk you buy out there in the supermarket now is fortified. Besides it being pasteurized, it's
Yeah.
fortified with vitamin A and iron and whatever, and it's a shame. But
Yeah. Yeah, and just to quickly to point out another thing, it doesn't really this sentence here doesn't really align with what they just said over here, where yeah, you can put together a mixture that kind of creates a copy of the food just based on the constituents, carbohydrates, fats, whatever, and protein, but it doesn't really elucidate the real whole food effect. So it doesn't really line up with we can just fortify the food with what? What would you fortify it with? More protein, more fat? You already show that it doesn't really work that way.
exactly. So now they look at eggs, for example. Specifically, we assess the impact of ingestion of whole eggs or isonitrogenous amounts of egg whites on the stimulation of MPS rates during recovery from exercise in healthy young men. And they demonstrated that the post-exercise MPS response was stronger with the ingestion of whole eggs versus egg whites, right? So no surprise there. The MPS rates between the whole egg and egg white conditions were not related to the postprandial plasma leucine availability, plasma insulin concentrations, muscle amino acid transporter content, uptake of dietary leucine into muscle, or muscle anabolic signaling pathway phosphorylation. Basically saying that it didn't have to do anything with leucine or insulin or muscle anabolic signaling pathway. Instead, it suggests that the food matrix of the whole egg, it's rich in quality proteins, lipids, vitamins, and minerals. That played a bigger role than the isonitrogenous amount of egg whites. Of course, they say more work is required to confirm, but it's interesting, right? It's interesting.
Yeah, yeah.
Of course, it's very interesting. Yeah.
It's super interesting.
Moving
Whole
on.
eggs, baby.
Yeah.
Whole eggs.
Yeah, whole eggs. There's something about whole eggs, right? And they have a nice diagram just below this.
Do you want
Keep
me to?
scrolling down.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, if you show the diagram, they're basically showing that the egg white has protein, water, and bioactive peptides, which play a role in stimulating MPS, and the bioactive peptides have antihypertensive, antioxidant, anti-diabetic, antimicrobial properties, while the egg yolk has, obviously protein too, which stimulates MPS, but then it's got lipids, which activate mTOR, cholesterol, vitamins that act as cofactors, minerals that act as cofactors. And so, that's when you start kind of like understanding more about the food matrix effect, right?
Yeah, yeah. All these cofactors, right? They're just like selenium, zinc, iron, phosphorus, calcium, or potassium, and then just
Yeah,
vitamin A, D,
yeah,
E, K, or like all these micronutrients are, just have an impact on you having the capacity to build muscle.
exactly, exactly. Which is, whenever someone brings out a powder and they're like, "Oh my God, I'm taking this creatine, I'm taking BCAAs, EAAs, I'm taking, whatever, you name it." I used to fall for that, but now
Same.
I think, whole foods, nature probably knows it best, and our bodies probably work best recognizing that, because that's the way we're geared. What happens if you consume like 100 grams of protein in your whey protein? Yeah, whey protein is like one of the best proteins you can buy, but you're not getting any of those other nutrients out there. You're not getting any of the minerals. It's just a isolated protein. I think we got a comment from Jason.
Jason, hey, what's up, man? What are your thoughts on the nutrient absorption of fully cooked eggs versus leaving the yolk runny? So, that is a good question. That definitely requires another deep dive, right? But based on like what I've seen, or from what I already like seen and studied, is like it's about the same. We're speaking about eggs, um, cooked eggs versus raw eggs, or leaving the yolk runny. It's about the same. I don't think there's much nutrient difference or nutrient absorption inhibition if you cook it too much or if you don't cook it. So neutral
Yeah,
stance, really.
just I think runny yolks are more delicious, and that leads to more gains. So, you wanna
Sure.
you people usually wanna you'll often hear like the commonly accepted stance is, cook the whites and leave the yolks raw, because the yolks is where you'll find most of the micronutrient content. So you really don't want to interfere with that. And yes, of course, cooking does have an effect on it, but what is the net effect of that in the human body? That's a separate question, and that is the real answer is, well, we don't really know. um, but as far as muscle protein synthesis, I remember we looked at some other research paper that really showed there is no difference between the two of them. But
Hmm.
maybe when it comes down to the other nutrients, it might play a role, a bigger role. But there doesn't seem to be any compelling evidence, right, for that. In any case, um, have
Yeah,
them raw, have them cooked, have them whichever way you enjoy them the most. The important thing is you're eating eggs.
yeah. At the end of the day, there is a key difference between egg white and a whole egg. That is probably the a more notable difference
Yeah,
versus fully cooked egg versus runny yolk. You're still having the yolk, which is what matters.
yeah, yeah. And I would say, don't be like those people who just have the egg white or just have the egg yolk. Just have the whole damn egg, raw or
Yeah,
not.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
All right, we're at minute 54 now.
Oh man, we gotta keep pushing. All right. So yeah, exercise, gut permeability, and implications of the food matrix. So this is pretty interesting. Exercise has the potential to directly impact gastrointestinal function. This is significant as proper GI function is necessary to sustain exercise performance, as well as promote substrate delivery to support glycogen resynthesis and protein synthesis during the recovery cycle from exercise. So, yeah, basically having a healthy GI tract is important so you can absorb the nutrients, absorb the proteins. An abundance of evidence has demonstrated that there is a reduced GI barrier function and potential mucosal disruption as a result of acute exercise. This has been demonstrated while running, cycling, resistance exercise, and prolonged endurance resistance. So like all these exercises had an impact on your GI. Actually, it sounds like a negative impact. like a reduced absorption capability. Um, Including in resistance training. However, um, the alterations in GI physiology appear to be related to this flankic hypoperfusion during the bout of exercise. Basically, your intestinal wall gets impacted after exercise. Um, a recent study indicated that mucosal disruption may explain some, but not all, of the exercise-induced alteration in intestinal permeability. Evidence suggests, however, that food nutrient ingestion may lead to improvements in the GI permeability response. So having food after exercise will recover your GI. Jason says, "Gotcha. Had 12 eggs today. May MPS be with me?" Haha. Oh man, 12 eggs. Absolutely. That's super anabolic.
Yeah, let there be gains.
Let there be gains, man. All right. Specifically, increased concentration of small intestine-derived fatty acid binding, which is often used as the biomarker of intestinal injury in the circulation, are detectable for several hours during a workout recovery from a 2-hour bout of treadmill running or after moderate intensity cycling. So this is also pretty interesting, right? They measure the IFABP, small intestine derived fatty acid binding protein. After someone ran 2 hours on the treadmill, right? Apparently, this is an indicator of intestinal injury. By contrast, when food is consumed post-exercise, GI permeability returned to baseline much more rapidly. In fact, when nutrition is consumed concurrently with exercise, it is shown that gut damage markers are unaltered during or after 2 hours of treadmill running as compared with consuming only water. So it seems like food, just the fact of eating food seems to be very important at maintaining your GI health. It is also been previously demonstrated that nutrient provision can ameliorate altered gut barrier function and prevent epithelial apoptosis. This sentence is also interesting, right? It's a lot of words, kind of complicated, but basically, it's epithelial apoptosis. Epithelial is just a type of skin or type of animal tissue found in humans or other animals. So here they're referring to, I'm guessing, to the intestinal skin, intestinal walls. Apoptosis means cell death. So just having nutrients prevents your skin or whatever cell walls to die. Makes a lot of sense. What is noteworthy is that exercise prior to food ingestion has the potential to alter food digestion and absorption of nutrients within the food matrix. For example, it has been shown that large food-derived peptides can cross the epithelial barrier during and after exercise, which is uncharacteristic of normal digestion. Thus, exercise has the potential to create an avenue via increased gut permeability for bioactive food constituents or non-protein components within a food matrix to enter circulation. Now, this is also a pretty kind of a flip side view of the increased gut permeability that you see post-exercise. You see increased gut permeability, so you can allow more bioactive food constituents, proteins, and non-protein components enter the bloodstream. So exercise kind of gives you that window to increase the nutrient absorption of the food that you eat. However, this is a great deal. This area needs a great deal of research to better define how exercise may assist in transfer of large peptides and non-nutrient components after food ingestion in their effects during post-exercise recovery. Excellent. You want to take us home with a conclusion, Mr. Anderson?
Yeah, so dietary protein ingestion immediately after exercise and throughout a prolonged recovery further increase muscle protein synthesis rates to facilitate non-hypertrophic and hypertrophic protein remodeling when compared to feeding alone. Recent studies demonstrate a developing role of the food matrix in modulating the post-exercise MPS response. Specifically, it seems that ingestion of protein-dense whole foods and the interaction of their non-protein nutritive components can likely potentiate the use of dietary amino acids for post-exercise MPS rates. However, it is unknown whether different food matrices, fortification of a food matrix, or food combinations can be utilized to differentially impact the post-exercise muscle protein synthetic response and overall protein requirement. Moreover, exercise and its subsequent impact on increased GI permeability may facilitate the transfer of non-protein components and protein peptides within the food matrix to modulate the post-exercise muscle adaptive response. Thus, a food-first approach to post-exercise protein intake will be beneficial for both the skeletal muscle adaptive response and diet quality for most people. And there you have it, guys.
There you have
Whole
it.
food, yeah, whole food, animal protein, nutrient dense, seems to be the winner here. Not only for its higher protein quality, but for its, other non-protein nutrients that are present, and we have still a lot to learn, between the different food matrix effects and the impacts that there might be with mixing different kinds of foods together. What if like the most anabolic combo turns out to be like steak and beans? Like what if science tells us something like this? It's like
That would be wild,
uh,
wild.
20 years down the line, no one saw that coming, but it turns out, all the bean eaters were onto something,
Yeah,
but not all the way there.
yeah. But one pretty cool thing that I would say, yeah. So yeah. This like conclusion kind of ends up saying, it's pretty hard to determine between the dairy matrix or the egg matrix, which matrix is better or which one optimizes for muscle MPS. It's pretty hard to say, pretty hard to kind of determine that. It brings a question like, does this change, your protein requirements for the day, right? Because right now it's just a blanket, 1 gram per pound or zero 0.8 grams per pound or 1.1, 1.2 grams per kilos, something like that or more. But, what if your food sources are, this whole foods? Does that change your protein requirements? Potentially, but obviously
No.
there's no way to conclusively say that. One other fun takeaway that I would take from this is, when there was a comparison between um, whole milk and beef, right? So whole milk just gave you that rapid rise in MPS, but then beef kind of gave you the expanded, elongated response, expanded response on MPS and higher amino acid availability. Could you use this to your advantage? For example, like post workout, within the first hour, maybe have like a glass of milk, 8 ounces, 4 ounces, maybe just a little bit, whatever. Seems like 8 grams of protein on your whole milk is greater than 15 grams of skim milk protein. So you only need maybe just gaining those 8 grams, 600 calories of whole milk. It's pretty good. Follow it up with a steak, and now you're covering your early recovery phase, and your extended recovery phase. I like the strategy.
That's a very good point, Jay. Yeah, and why is that? That's a very good question, but that is what this review paper seems to conclude from the available research. So so it's actually very interesting the now that you put it like that. Um,
Yeah.
Post workout milk and steak, for the longer duration.
Yeah.
So, steak, eggs, and milk, when in doubt, definitely the most anabolic foods. Have them all after your workout, before, during, and after. And your gut will even take care of selecting for the protein.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, man. That pretty much covers, because then the paper also starts talking about egg matrix, dairy matrix, the beef matrix. Well, okay, hey, that's what I eat. That my meal looks like all these three, right? So I don't have to select one or the other. I can choose all.
Yeah, yeah. And then, I wonder, it was just, oh my God, like it's so interesting. Like, I wish we knew more. I wish we could know, like, what about yogurt? What about cheese?
Yeah.
Should I be having those? Or, maybe 1 ounce of cheese post workout is like incredibly anabolic, and
Yeah.
maybe your protein requirement even goes down when you're having this, right?
Yeah.
This whole blanket recommendation. What if it's just all BS, right? What if it's all just a ploy to get us to eat more than we need?
Yeah, yeah. It's also interesting, right? Because it means like you're being more efficient with your with each bite of food, right? So it kind of
Exactly.
enables the opportunity for someone to be 80% fat, right? Because once you hit that 70 to 80% fat, it's much harder to reach that 1 gram per pound of body weight protein target, right? For example, today for me, I went for a higher fat day, ended up being 73% fat, 27% protein, and that looked like 159 grams of protein when I weigh 196, right? So, my protein intake for the day ended up being zero point 0.8 grams per pound. So a little bit lower, but still within that, provable uh, study, provable muscle building effect. Um, but then again, all my food choices was beef and eggs and butter. Um, so you can probably get away with higher fat um, and kind of help your hormones because now you're consuming even higher fat, help your energy levels, your mood, because now you're consuming higher fat because you're just being more efficient with your protein sources. Again, this is just speculation, right? I like my high protein days as well because I get to eat a lot more meat.
Yeah, well, some people make the case that we're not necessarily carnivores, but we're lipivores,
Oh
right?
yeah,
We're first and
Emperor Hearn.
foremost fat eaters, um, rather than meat eaters, because supposedly back in the day when we had large herbivores, much larger than your average cow today. Uh, the bigger the animals get, the higher the proportion of fat in their whole carcass is, right? So you'd have access to like way more fat than meat back in the day. Um, you know, just things to consider as we're putting this puzzle together. We don't have all the answers, but one thing is for sure, it seems like animal foods are the best choice you can make when it comes to fulfilling your protein needs, just based off of this review paper, and then of course based on the previous study clubs we've conducted, when we're looking at cholesterol and we're looking at the fatty acids and their effects on the human body. Animal fats also win compared to other plant oils, seed oils or not.
Yeah,
So there you have it. As we put this puzzle together, you know.
yeah, man. No, I really like this paper. It was, very, very educational, very informative. Um, and obviously, I love the title and the whole theme throughout it. It's, the
Yeah,
whole food first approach. Um,
but it aligns with our message.
it aligns with our message. And it also brings up like a lot of the drawback of the current studies. It's all the studies are just on isolated proteins, um, which makes sense. Supplement industry is going to fund, or what does my supplement do? And what is my supplement? My supplement is whey protein powder. So you're just going to have studies that kind of support the supplement. Um, Obviously,
Exactly.
if you start
Because of
showing
the
studies,
leucine. You need the leucine.
the leucine hypothesis. Um, it's all very interesting. It's all very interesting.
Yeah,
But
it
yeah,
seems we have a very cursory understanding of what really matters.
yeah, yeah. All right. Time is up. We've actually gone over by a little bit, but yeah, let's wrap it up here. All right, thank you everyone. Thank you
All
for
right,
tuning in. Thank you for watching. You can support this channel by liking, subscribing, hitting the notification bell. Follow us on Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, TikTok. Um, yeah, show some love.
yeah.
Any
Join our
any
Discord.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's free. Zoom meetings every week, monthly challenges every month. Buy our merch. Check out the website. Buy our Make Butter Great Again hats. They're great conversation starters. Put politics aside, guys. The real thing that matters is food.
The real thing that matters is food.
Yeah,
Yes,
and then
sir.
of course, if you need help with your weight loss journey, we do 2-on-1 individualized consultations to help you. So hit us up, send us an email, check us out on @Butterfield Fitness, DM us, anything. Check out our fitness content. We want to help you get stronger and healthier. Anything
Yes.
else, Jay?
No. With that all said, thank you, Mr. Anderson. Enjoy a great evening, rest of your evening, and everyone else enjoy the great rest of your day whenever you're listening to this. Thank you for tuning in and wishing you all a happy, healthier, higher, healthy, more nutrient dense lifestyle from here on, forever and ever. Bye bye.
Preach. Bye-bye.
Gonna eat it by the stick tonight. Gonna eat out this way.